Now, the other day we talked about Alicia Andrews, one of the 5 defendants convicted in the murder of Jacksonville rapper Julio Foolio. And at the time of that video, we're still waiting on her sentencing. But today, that wait is over. Alicia Andrews was actually just sentenced. And I want to walk you guys through exactly what happened in that courtroom, because there was a lot that happened. From Foolio's mother taking a stand and delivering one of the most emotional victim impact statements you'll hear, to the prosecution and defense going back and forth with completely opposite asks, all the way to the moment the judge dropped the sentence. So let's get into it. Now, the sentencing basically started with Foolio's mother taking a stand, and honestly, just her being there set the tone for everything.
Whether she pulled the trigger or not, my son would still be alive today had people not participated in carrying out this plan. A mother lives with instinct and intuition, and mine tells me that this was not ignorance. This was participation. It was calculated. They planned it.
She opened up by addressing the court about Alicia's role in her son's death, and she made it very clear from the jump she wasn't buying the idea that Alicia didn't know what was going on. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, whether she pulled the trigger or not, my son would still be alive if people hadn't participated in carrying out this plan. And then she said something that really hit me. She said a mother lives with instinct and intuition, and hers was telling her this was not ignorance. It was participation. It was calculated. She talked about how they had the entire drive there to change their minds, something I covered in my Sean Gathright videos. Every second, every minute, every hour, they could have turned around and just not did it. But they didn't. She said they hunted her son down like a deer in the woods. She called it loyalty to violence over humanity and talked about everything Charles Foolio was robbed of, the chance to grow older, become a father, continue his career, just simply live. And she said every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering is now filled with grief. And then she looked at everybody and said that Alicia's family can still see her. They can talk to her. They can see their child. But I have to go visit my son at a wall in a cemetery, she said. And then she closed it by asking the court to impose a sentence that truly reflected the seriousness of Alicia's role. Because in her words, choices were made. She's not wrong. And those choices had deadly consequences. After she finished, the judge confirmed the defense wasn't calling any witnesses, which is important, and we'll get to that in a second. So after Foolio's mother stepped down, the judge turned it to the prosecution to make their sentencing recommendation. And the state did not come in soft. Now, one of the things they actually did was they addressed something the defense had filed, a motion where they listed 8 different cases, basically trying to show the court examples of other manslaughter cases where they argued that Alicia should get something similar. The prosecution acknowledged that they saw this filing, but they pushed back on it hard. They said, look, we reviewed all of these 8 cases right here, and they're obviously very different from the situation we have right here. In most of those cases, most of the people, they had basically negotiated pleas, meaning the defendant and the prosecution made a deal before it ever went to trial. And some of them involved mental disorders. And they were basically isolated incidents, a lot of them. And the prosecution made a point that was very simple. None of those cases are anything like this one. And then they reminded the judge of something important. This case was originally filed as murder. And then the jury came back with manslaughter, and the prosecution said that they respected the jury's decision. But they were very clear that just because the charge came down doesn't mean that the facts changed. They said that the facts of the case are still egregious. This was a person who was hunted down. Foolio was hunted down and killed. So the prosecution's argument was that Alicia still needs to be held accountable for her participation, whatever that role was. And they actually asked for the maximum. So that would be 15 years in Florida State Prison. They based that on the seriousness and calculated nature of how this whole thing was carried out. And they also pointed directly to Foolio's mother's statement as further reason why the maximum was warranted. So at this point in the hearing, the prosecution had laid out their position clearly, 15 years, no less. But then it was the defense turn, and they came in with a completely different approach. Right out the gate, they told the judge, we're not accepting a 15-year sentence, and they actually cited a specific section of Florida law that allows a judge to go below the sentencing guidelines. And their argument for using it was straightforward. Alicia was an accomplice, and a relatively minor one at that, compared to everyone else's involvement in the case. And keep in mind, guys, the 4 men she was charged alongside were convicted of first-degree murder and were literally facing the death penalty. So that's important to note. And what the defense did here was that they pointed that out directly. And they said that even the state acknowledges there were differences between Alicia and those co-defendants. So the defense was asking the court, if the system itself already recognizes she played a lesser role, why is she being treated like she didn't? They also did something interesting, and this is about those 8 cases that I mentioned just a second ago. They basically said, look, we're not claiming those cases are identical to this one, and even called Alicia's case a unicorn, meaning it's so unusual it's hard to find a perfect comparison. But their point in bringing those cases wasn't to find a mirror image. It was to show the court a range of what manslaughter sentences actually look like in Florida. And then they walked through some of them. In this one case, one defendant, same exact sentencing points as Alicia's, got 7 years plus probation. And that guy actually told officers at the scene that he pulled the trigger himself. Another case, the guy was initially charged with second-degree murder, pleaded down to manslaughter, got 5 years. In another case, another defendant had even more sentencing points than Alicia and still only got 5 years. So the defense message was very clear. Nobody on that list got 15 years because they were trying to put her away for 15 years. And then they basically said, hey, the state is asking for the maximum on someone who has never been convicted of anything in her entire life. This is her first offense. And then they also mentioned that Alicia is planning to appeal this particular conviction. So she believes she should have not been convicted at all. And because of that ongoing legal fight, she and her legal team made the strategic decision not to take the stand on this particular day. And they asked the judge not to hold her silence against her. And then this is interesting. They closed by asking the court to go well below the guidelines. So what they wanted was time served, followed by 5 years. Only 5 years of probation. Basically asking her to walk out of that courtroom today. So at this point, you got 2 completely opposite asks in front of the judge. The prosecution, they wanted 15 years, and the defense wanted time served and probation. Crazy. And now it all comes down to what the judge decides, right? And the judge decided 15 years in Florida State Prison.
All right, so the court, having obviously reviewed the trial transcripts, the court file, all the evidence in this case, the pre-sentence investigation report, the argument of counsel, it's the judgment sentence in order of this court to adjudicate the defendant guilty, sentence her to 15 years in the Florida State Prison.
That was the decision. The maximum in this entire case, by the way, that she could have gotten. So the judge sided completely with the prosecution and gave Alicia Andrews every single year they asked for. And then the judge also reminded Alicia that she has 30 days to appeal the judgment and sentence. Now look, Alicia's team has already made it clear that they're appealing. They believe she shouldn't have been convicted in the first place. And the sentence is only going to add fuel to that particular fight. So while today felt like a conclusion, it's still not over. We're still going to hear more things from this particular story. But as of today, Alicia Andrews is heading to Florida State Prison for 15 years. It's really interesting to look at the contrast between what Alicia got and then what her co-defendants got. And those people were Isaiah Chance, that was her boyfriend, and then we had Sean Goodkid turned YN Gathright, and then the 2 cousins, Murphy brothers. Or actually, yeah, cousins. They were all sentenced to life without parole. So they're never coming home. Alicia got 15 years and they're getting life in prison. And the debate about whether that gap is justice or not is something people are definitely having a conversation about right now. So in my last video, we went over all the specific details and the full extent of Alicia's involvement. Highly recommend you guys check out that video. Definitely check it out. It's a really good video. But let's talk about a few things regarding this sentencing. So Florida has a what they call an 85% rule, meaning she has to serve at least 85% of that sentence before she's even eligible for release. That's about 12 years and 9 months minimum. She's already been locked up for some time now, so some of that time will likely be credited toward her sentence. That time will essentially get credited. So realistically, she's looking at about around, give or take, between 10 years or 11 more years inside, assuming her appeal goes nowhere, which I don't think it's gonna go anywhere, just what I think, right? So now there is a conversation to be had about privilege, because let's be real, man. Alicia is a woman, a young pretty thing at that, okay? She's kind of cute. It is what it is. She's kind of cute, right? But the look aside, the picture that was painted of her throughout this entire case was that she was basically a victim herself. Her defense leaned heavily into the idea that she was under the influence of her boyfriend Isaiah Chance, Gadaze, that she was manipulated, that she was controlled, that she didn't fully understand what she was walking into that night. Isaiah Chance got life in prison, no possibility of parole. He's never coming home. And Alicia got 15 years. Now, personally, I think she should have been convicted of first-degree murder. And here's why. When you look at how calculated and planned this whole thing was, and the fact that her phone was literally an integral part of coordinating this entire operation. She was sharing the location with Sean Gathright, who had that AK, right? They're tracking Foolio's movements, communicating with the group throughout that night. And then on top of that, she was contacting her boyfriend afterwards, after they all got caught, right? So there were so many things that contradicted the narrative that she was just some innocent bystander who didn't know what was going on, the timeline alone tells a very different story. Now, obviously, the jury saw it differently. They believed her enough, or at least had enough doubt to not convict her on first-degree murder. And I think that does say something. It suggests that even in the eyes of the jury, there was some level of separation between her role and the role of the men who pulled those triggers. But isn't it interesting? This was a group of people. They all traveled together. They all moved together. They all executed this plan together. And yet the fate of one person in that group ended up looking drastically different from everyone else's. That's worth sitting on. And then there's another layer to this that I think people don't talk about enough. What kind of mindset does it take, specifically as a young woman, to be involved in something like this? Because when we talk about gang life and street culture, a lot of that is heavily associated with men for a reason, right? And gangs do, of course, involve women, but they often use them in a very specific way. Often not as killers. A lot of times it's to set somebody up. So they might send a woman your way just to get you comfortable so they can lower your guard, and then you get popped. That's the tactic, right? But when you have a woman who was this deep into the actual operation, it really makes you stop and ask yourself, what has to happen in someone's life? What does someone have to see? What does someone have to normalize to get to this point? That's the real question here. And then you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. How many lives did this one group of people destroy? Julio's mother, who now has to visit her son at a cemetery. His family, who never get another birthday, another holiday, another phone call. And then on the other side, everyone involved in this case, their families, their futures, all of it gone. And for what? A street beef? Something that holds absolutely no type of real weight in the real world outside of the block and the neighborhood and all that weird stuff. Now, with all that being said, I want to be clear about something. I'm not sitting here saying Alicia got a slap on her wrist. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that she escaped the worst of it. At the end of the day, 15 years is not nothing. Let's not act like it is. That is still time she will never get back. Not a single day of it. She's 23 years old right now. If she serves the full 85%, she walks out at around 36. And as a woman, just think about that for a second. Your entire 20s, the years where you're figuring out who you are, building something, experiencing life, gone, wasted away inside a prison cell. As a man, that's when life really is just getting started. And as a woman, it's obviously very different because men and women are very different. So it's a different kind of loss as a woman. Not worse, just different. Your youth, your prime, years gone. And you did it all for absolutely nothing. If you made it this far, drop a like on this video and subscribe if you're new here. My name is BlackySpeakz. Nice to meet you. So what do you guys think? 15 years, was it too little or was it appropriate for her involvement in this case? Very curious to hear what you guys have to say. Y'all let me know in the comment section below and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace, I'm out. And I forgot, the next video I'm dropping is on David actually. It's like a documentary, like 30 minutes, pretty long. So when you see that pop up in your algorithm, definitely click on that video. It's a really good one. Can't wait for you to see that one. Anyway, I'm out guys, peace.